Welcome back to the Insights podcast by the UNSW Law Society. We're your hosts for your episode, Will and Annabella.
Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
We're super proud to have Herbert Smith Freehills Kramer as the sponsor of this episode. HSF Kramer was formed in June 2025 through the transformational combination of Herbert Smith Freehills and Kramer Levin, creating a world-leading global law firm. HSF Kramer offers top-tier legal services in everything from corporate deals and finance to dispute resolution and major infrastructure projects.
HSF Kramer has built a reputation as one of the world's leading firms, consistently earning industry accolades that set it apart from the competition. Whether it's advising on billion-dollar mergers or representing clients in complex cross-border disputes, the firm brings a wealth of experience to the table for its clients around the world. In fact, HSF Kramer is particularly renowned for its strength in high-stakes litigation and recently led Asia-Pacific rankings for major M&A deals by value. In short, HSF Kramer is a trusted name in law, a firm at the forefront of the industry, combining global reach with deep expertise. Their ambition is to help you achieve your goals.
If you're interested in life at HSF Kramer, this episode shows how its clerkship and grad programs can fast-track a legal career. Our guests, Catherine and Emma, share first-hand stories of their journeys at HSF Kramer, covering day-to-day work, the training that fuels professional growth, standout career moments, and practical tips for aspiring lawyers. To start, let's break the ice. We have a few icebreaker questions for you. If you weren't a lawyer, what do you think you'll be doing right now?
That's a very good question because I have now been a lawyer for the past decade of my life, and so thinking about what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this is a tricky question. But I did a science degree along with my law degree, and so I guess if I wasn't in law or using my law degree in some other way, I'd probably be doing some sort of scientific role. Maybe academia, but who really knows?
And what about you?
Back in my primary school days, I would have said I was a dancing vet, or I would be a dancing vet because I compete and love dancing, and who wouldn't want to be around animals all the time. But in reality, probably something similar to Catherine. I'd either be doing like scientific research or doing some sort of clinical work in the medical sciences.
So both of you really like writing still, so you would pursue that in other areas as well?
Probably.
Another icebreaker.
Which TV or movie lawyer, or any fictional character, would you love to bring as a teammate for work, and what would you bring them in charge of?
Tough one.
So, perhaps as problematic and probably entertaining Cleaver Green would be as a colleague, I'd probably say Mickey Haller from the Lincoln Lawyer. Perhaps my response is because I just watched that and I really liked it. I thought he'd have maybe some creative ideas. I'd probably get him to look at all our matters and see if there's any more like creative or out there strategic approaches we could take.
I've never watched Lincoln Lawyers. Is it like a...
I liked it. Apparently there's TV and movies and things, but yeah.
To introduce our guests, Catherine London is a senior associate in the disputes team at HSF Kramer, whose practice focuses particularly on dispute clients in the construction and infrastructure space. Catherine guides clients through litigation, arbitration, mediation, and expert determination, and provides advice on project delivery across a range of projects in the energy, transport, infrastructure, and major development sectors. Catherine has also worked on a range of general commercial disputes, including a major class action. She was recognized as the 2024 Lawyers Weekly Woman in Law Senior Associate of the Year finalist and twice shortlisted in the 2023 30 Under 30 Awards.
To introduce our other guest, Emma is a solicitor in her third 6-month graduate rotation. She also currently works in disputes. However, her team focuses on AML CTF related disputes and investigations, corporate crime and investigation matters, and advisory work related to statutory licensing and regulatory regimes. During the graduate program, Emma has also gained experience in class actions, on pro bono matters, as well as in the corporate practice group in the private equity and venture capital team. Emma started at HSF Kramer as a clerk in November 2022, after which she took a year off from legal work to complete her thesis on pediatric cancer before returning to HSF Kramer as a graduate.
To start us off, could you both give us a brief overview of your practice groups and what they broadly involve at HSF Kramer?
Yeah, so I am in the disputes group, as is Emma at the moment. I did rotations through my graduate program through the environment planning teams, the disputes team, and the restructuring, turnaround and insolvency team, which sat within the finance group. my current work focuses on construction and infrastructure clients and doing a range of disputes for them. I do everything from the kind of big litigations where everyone's very much in battle mode through to a lot of kind of pre-dispute advice work where we're helping clients to try and avoid getting in those big, long disputes processes by thinking about how they can position themselves ahead of that to try and minimise the prospect of getting there.
Yeah, you've already heard a bit about my background, but my current team predominantly deals with litigious matters, often involving wagering clients, banks or other financial institutions, and these can be typical commercial disputes, litigation brought by their customers, or litigation arising out of regulatory investigations. We also do a bit of advisory work for these clients, usually regarding the statutory obligations or various licensing regimes that might apply to them, such as the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing regime or wagering regimes. And this team also does a bit of regulatory notice responses and regulatory investigations. But I'd say a lot of the commercial litigation teams have a fairly similar remit, but depending on the practice cultivated by the partners, there may be a particular sector focus or a different proportion of work oriented to those three limbs.
And I think between what Emma and I have just said, you can see that even within one main practice group, which is the disputes group, there is quite a variety of work. Our disputes group is very large by size, and so there are a number of different areas of emphasis from IP to construction to tax and regulatory, financial services, anti-money laundering, class actions, you name it, there's probably someone in our disputes group that does it, but that's just one arm of the firm, and what you experience more broadly throughout the graduate program is getting exposed to other areas of our firm which are similarly extraordinarily strong groups, from corporate through to projects, finance, employment, you name it. In the commercial space, our firm probably does it.
Yeah, there's nothing short that HSF Kramer does not cover, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure everyone's interested. Could you tell us a bit more about your role and what does a day in the life look like for each of you guys? If you could just step through each of your responsibilities and how a day goes.
Yeah, so naturally my day is a bit different from Catherine's. So on some days I might be given ad hoc tasks that arise in the course of the matters that my team's currently working on. On other days, I might be progressing work streams that I'm managing. So for example, when I was in my transaction rotation, I would be managing, for example, the due diligence committee work stream and keeping that moving along and to timeline. And whereas in my litigation rotations, I may be progressing or furthering the work on our lay witness evidence preparation, to name a few examples.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one day that is necessarily going to look identical to another. In my practice area, we tend to work on a range of different matters at any given time, which creates quite a lot of variety to the day. So, for example, yesterday I was in negotiation with one of our clients in the morning. In the afternoon, I was leading a witness interview with one of our lay witnesses on a case that's currently going through arbitration. In the middle of that, there's some advice work to a client about potentially calling on a bank guarantee. And so it's really varied. I think one of the things about disputes is that when you do get into large-scale litigation, the matters can run for quite a while. And so having a diversity of things that you're working on means that you might be seeing one phase of a dispute on one of your matters, while at the same time another one of your matters might be in an earlier or later stage. And so you're getting exposure to all kinds of the dispute's life cycle by working on that variety of things in any given day.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like a very dynamic line of work as well.
As a follow-up question, what do you think are some key skills that make someone well-suited in disputes or just HSF Kramer in general?
I think that's a difficult question in some ways because the people that we are lucky enough to have working alongside us here at HSF Kramer are so varied. So many different personalities, so many different interests outside of work. I think the thing that probably unites us is a real desire to give our best to each other and to our clients, particularly at the more junior levels, a willingness to learn and demonstrate enthusiasm for doing the best job with whatever task is put in front of you. I think some people who have been through the graduate program will talk about having a sort of natural affinity for one practice area or another, but my experience, and I don't know if this is yours as well, Emma, is that you actually need to just get your feet wet and try out the different practice groups to work out what you're suited to, try something new that maybe you hadn't thought about, because you hear so many stories of partners who've had extremely long careers that start with, when I started, I wanted to be an X kind of lawyer, and actually after my graduate rotations, I just fell in love with Y. And so that open-mindedness and willingness to just take whatever is in front of you and take it with both hands, I think are things that really unite us and put us in such good stead to be a really cohesive team.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Catherine said, but I guess if we're putting it to a more granular level, I'd say as a junior, attention to detail, super, super critical, and having really strong fundamental and core research skills so that the seniors can allocate tasks to you and know that it's getting done accurately, and that everything's being covered, and that you're looking at, like, for example, knowing to look not just at the legislative materials, the case law, but also the procedural elements that I think are probably less apparent and less relied upon or studied during our legal studies, and are really critical as a junior to be able to know to look at and to assess for their seniors when doing any task. And then further to that, just proactivity and having a really strong understanding of what's happening with the matter and keeping things moving along, knowing what the internal and external deadlines are, and being there and ready and informed enough to then make your seniors' lives easier and keep things moving along, and being there to rely on. Yeah.
100%. I think being proactive and on the ready to, take on whatever is necessary is definitely a key trait that people should have. Another question. So what drew you to life at HSF Kramer?
Yeah, so I feel like many people will give you a similar answer to the one I'm about to give, but essentially it was the people and the culture. Obviously, HSF Kramer has a really strong position in the legal market and a really good reputation in Australia. However, what really stood out to me was when I met people from HSF Kramer prior to and during the clerkship. They were all really, really genuine, down to earth, and easy to get along with. And I observed that people from a really junior level were comfortable expressing their views on matters about the firm and about the legal profession, and who were deeply involved in all facets of the firm. So whether that's not just work-related matters, but also pro bono work, the various networks, and the social and development committees. So I think that I perceived everyone to be super welcoming, and genuine, and I think that made me feel as though I could have a long-term career at a place where I'm free to come as I am and enjoy every day.
Yeah, I think Emma started that answer really well by saying you'll hear this answer from a lot of people, because for me it was the same. It was really backed by the extraordinarily strong legal reputation within the market. That meant that even though I didn't quite know exactly what practice group I wanted to ultimately end up in, I knew that whatever team I ended up in here would be an incredibly strong team in terms of the quality of work. But I agree with Emma that the real clincher was that all of the people that I met from this firm throughout the clerkship recruitment process, and there were quite a few of them throughout the various events that were conducted throughout that process, there was never any conversation that I walked away from thinking I didn't click with that person, or that felt like a waste of my time or their time. It was just a genuine, Emma said down to earth, I think is right. Really wonderful people, diverse group of people, but with this real culture piece at front of mind.
And I think it's really hard to ascertain the culture and the type of people that work there from doing research on the firm's website. So I think moving into the clerkship process, really take the opportunity to speak to as many people as possible about their experience, both work-related, matter-related, but also more generally their life at the firm, and sort of get their experiences. And what I did when I was going through the clerkship process was I looked at my peers at university or other people I knew that were going into legal careers, and I sort of assessed whether if they're people who I'm friends with or who I have similar values with and they're choosing to go to those firms, then perhaps that would match the kind of firm that I'd fit into as well.
Yeah, that's really awesome, and it sounds like a great place to work. And a collegiate environment is, as we know, so important for junior lawyers, especially early on in their career. So following on from that, we know that HSF Kramer is a global firm, and I'm sure there's many international secondment opportunities. We just wanted to ask you guys, have you guys ever thought of going overseas? How easy is it to get into those secondment opportunities as well?
Yeah, so I've definitely thought about going overseas, or at least having a period of time in another office. HSF Kramer is really proud of our global reach, and obviously with the recent merger, those opportunities are increasing. So we do offer international secondments to graduates. It is a very competitive program. There's only a few seats across the HSF Kramer network each year, but every Australian graduate towards the end of their rotation can apply. And there's also further opportunities to work overseas during your time at HSF Kramer. So you can internally transfer to another office, and usually that occurs when there's some sort of resourcing need. But irrespective of that, I would just make it really clear when you start at the firm, to your supervising partner and to HR, and demonstrate that you want the opportunity to move overseas and go to a different office. And while technically you can internally transfer in any area of the law that HSF Kramer works in, I'd also start thinking about whether the area that you end up choosing to settle in develops skills and legal knowledge that's highly transferable to the jurisdiction in which you want to go into. So that's also something to keep in mind when you're moving forward.
The other part of our international network to keep in mind, in addition to relocation for 6-month or longer secondments, is our ability to work together as a global team. So within the construction infrastructure disputes team, for example, there's a lot of work happening with our Asian offices and our Middle East offices on enormous construction projects that are going through billion-dollar arbitrations, and those teams will typically be cross-office teams. Our Australian arbitration practice, for example, has recently, in the last couple of years, set up an international arbitration hub, which is really aiming to strengthen the connections, particularly with our Asian offices. And I know there are solicitors in my team, for example, who've done work with Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, Tokyo. There's plenty of opportunities to work at a global level, as well as the international movement opportunities, which Emma's just discussed.
Yeah, on a personal note, even within 1 week of my time in my second rotation in the private equity and venture capital team, I was working on a multi-jurisdictional matter in which we leveraged people in our European offices and in the UK and also in Asia, and which was run and coordinated out of the Sydney, Australia office. So that was a really great opportunity, and it was really, really interesting to see how seamlessly all the offices work together, and we were progressing the matter pretty much 24 hours a day with time zone differences. So that's something that can really be of value to the clients that we work for.
So oftentimes we hear lawyers say they kind of fell into the practice area or they just fell in love with the team. So we're wondering with you guys, with the practice groups that you're in, is that something you always had in mind as a goal, or is that something that you kind of adopted along the way?
Yeah, it's a great question, and as I said earlier, I think the rotation program allows you to actually try out a number of different areas and experience what it's like in those teams. I probably was more inclined towards a kind of litigious or advisory practice rather than transactional one, and that ended up being where I settled at the end of the rotations that I completed. But having said that, the transactional rotation that I completed, I learned so much from. I met people in parts of the firm that I wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to, gained skills and knowledge that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten if I'd limited my mindset to only wanting to be in a particular practice group. And so even though I did ultimately end up in a disputes team, the rotation experience was really, really valuable for me in developing me as a more well-rounded lawyer.
Yeah, I have a very, very similar answer. I had always thought that I'd end up in a disputes team. I loved mooting. I enjoyed litigation-based courses at university, and all of my legal experience prior to joining the firm were in litigation. And I never really expected to work in a transactional team. And then I entered my PEVC rotation, and I really enjoyed the work, the fast-paced atmosphere, the degree of client exposure and project management development, and those sorts of elements of the work there. And so I think that really shows that you shouldn't come into the clerkship or the graduate program with preconceived ideas on where you want to end up. and you may be surprised by the kind of teams and the work that you really enjoy. So ultimately just be curious and then make the most of the opportunity you're given at HSF Kramer to undertake both disputes-based and transactional rotations.
Okay, so now that we've learned a bit about Emma and Catherine's backgrounds, Clerkship season is on the horizon and many students are interested in joining HSF Kramer, so let us shift to the application process. So Emma and Catherine, is it okay for you guys to run us through the application process?
Absolutely. So applications are now open and will close on Sunday, the 13th of July. Here at HSF Kramer, we have a 3-stage process to the clerkship applications. First, you submit your CV, transcript and cover letter and answer some general questions about your experience and interests. We then invite a number of people to come in for a first round interview, which here occurs one-on-one with a partner. So it's really a conversation like you would have any other conversation one-on-one with someone. If you're successful in getting through that, there's then a second round interview, and there's a number of opportunities to meet people from across the firm throughout those recruitment stages through information evenings and similar. We're really proud that we have quite a number of partners from different practice groups involved in that recruitment process who are willing to give up their time and really see the value in investing in our graduates and solicitors of tomorrow and getting to know our applicants and why they're interested in pursuing this kind of career and why they might ultimately be interested in coming to work for a firm like this. The clerkship program itself starts in late November and is generally available to those in their penultimate year and above. I also note that you must have the right to work in Australia upon commencing the clerkship, given that you join the firm as an employee at that point in time.
To learn a bit more about the rotations, how long are they and what kind of work would clerks expect to do as they enter the field?
So our clerkship rotations are about 4 weeks long with cohort-wide training at the beginning and then the Christmas break. I'd say the clerks are generally given more ad hoc tasks on the various matters that the particular team they're in is working on at that point in time. So for example, it could be providing assistance with written advices, preparing for upcoming witness or expert interviews, general legal research, and perhaps involvement in drafting some transaction or ancillary documents. Teams are also quite eager to give clerks exposure, so they may invite you to client or witness meetings, or you might be allocated work on BD-related tasks, such as preparing podcast scripts, articles, and publications for the firm.
Over the course of your clerkship, you can complete 2 rotations, one before Christmas and one after Christmas. So as part of the program, you'll get the opportunity to work in 2 different teams. And I think the work, as Emma said, is a little bit dependent on what is going on in the team at the particular time that you are there. But clerks are not just there being given busy work. They are doing real work, contributing to our clients, really important matters that we work with our clients on. As an example, in one of my rotations as a summer clerk, I was writing a strategy paper for what I'm just going to describe as a sort of iconic Sydney location, and that strategy paper was in fact still being referred to by the team 3 years later. So the fact that I was a summer clerk did not mean that I was not being involved in a really meaningful way. In fact, it was quite the opposite.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it sounds like you get a real sense of the firm's work and you get to be involved from day one, which is obviously what any kind of junior lawyer would want as well. So you mentioned that there's 2 rotations that are completed, and I'm sure many of our audiences have a particular preference. They think they want to get into deals or they wanted to get into litigation. We were wondering, is there any scope to apply for preferences in terms of rotations? How would your rotations be decided at HSF Kramer?
Yeah, so I definitely think there is scope to demonstrate your preference for a particular practice group or even particular team within the firm. So when you're applying to the clerkship, you will need to demonstrate why you want to work in corporate law and also why you want to do this at HSF Kramer in particular. So if you have a strong interest in a particular team or practice group, I would demonstrate that and why you would add strength to that team at this firm. And shortly prior to the program, HR will also circulate a more formal form in which you can indicate your preferences, and they try to allocate clerks to one of their top preferences as expressed in that form. So there's both the informal way of showing your eagerness to join a particular area of the firm and also the more formal, structured way.
Bear in mind that you'll also have the opportunity, if you return as a graduate, to then complete 3 graduate rotations, which are 6 months each. And so there will be scope to explore a number of different teams across both the clerkship rotations and the graduate rotations. What I would encourage people to do is keep an open mind and use it as an opportunity to try something that is a little bit outside your comfort zone, or something that you don't know that much about, because you might surprise yourself and really enjoy that area. At a minimum, you know you're going to learn something new as part of that rotation. And so I always encourage people to think about having a diversity of experiences as part of the rotation programs.
Yeah, 100%. This links back to the whole being curious, being able to work on your feet and being able to take on a variety of tasks. As it's already been discussed, HSF Kramer's clerkship is only a very few short months. It's only 2 months with 2 rotations in between. What is the single most important habit you think clerks should form on day 1 to make the most out of their experience?
I think it's an eagerness to learn and enthusiasm to contribute. Clerks are not expected to come in on day 1 knowing the Corporations Act inside out, or knowing every case that any particular court has ever handed down. We know that there is a lot you learn in law school, but there's a lot more you learn once you get here and get on your feet and get into the professional world. So it's really that openness, willingness to learn, and then some of the traits which Emma touched on earlier around having attention to detail and making sure that you're applying yourself in the best way possible and bringing your best to every task.
Yeah, I also think another really good habit to get into from the outset of your career even is, with every task you get, aim to not just meet the expectations and do it well and in accordance with the instructions, but think, how can I make this work product be presented or completed or elevated in a way that makes the recipient's life easier? So that can be done in a large variety of ways, and it demonstrates that you're reliable and you can take on increasingly difficult tasks because you really grasp what is the work product being used for, and you're anticipating the needs of the recipient.
Yeah, great. And it sounds like you just got to get stuck in and make sure that you've kind of putting your work, your best effort forward in the work that you do as well. So this question's for Emma specifically. So having been a clerk, been there and done that, and now in the graduate program, I guess what surprised you most once you started the graduate program? Did you notice anything different from the clerkship program?
I mean, there are a lot of small differences between the 2 programs, but I think the most stark disparity is the difference in the level of responsibility and the continuity you have over the matters that you're working on as compared to the clerkship. So given the short time frame of the clerkship, I think that, at least in my experience, there was a less of an opportunity than you have in the graduate program to really develop a really comprehensive understanding of the matters that you're working on. And it can be hard to have visibility over the full breadth of the matter. So I think graduate rotations are really what you make of it. You get a lot more opportunity to take on greater responsibility, you have more oversight of the matter, and you can actually be a really big driver of progress on the matters. And that relates to the earlier point on being proactive and knowing the timeframes for all the underlying work streams. You can really add value to your team and be given more and more responsibility from your supervising partners and all the seniors and juniors that you work with if you show that proactivity and you assume that responsibility.
Yep, 100%. And just circling back onto the previous discussion, where, when clerks enter on the first day, they're not expected to know Corporations Act, in and out by themselves. What formal training sessions, mentoring, or feedback loops can clerks expect during the program?
So there's a range of both formal and informal training and mentoring programs that are in place. As a clerk, you'll have 3 sort of formal levels of mentors and supervisors. So you'll have a buddy who's typically a junior lawyer or a rotating graduate, who's your kind of day-to-day point of contact on the questions like, how do I make the printer work? What does it mean if the door is closed to the office of the senior associate or the partner that's given me this piece of work? What's the team dynamic? You'll then have a supervising senior associate coach, as well as a supervising partner. Outside of that, I think everyone in the teams really takes a lot of responsibility for the development of clerks and graduates, and so you would be expected to be working with people outside those 3 immediate people that have been allocated to you, and working more broadly within the team. There's a number of formal training sessions that are also run throughout the clerkship program, which Some of them are skills-based. You have a couple of days of induction to get you started that gets you up to speed on the firm, its values, some of the key programs and networks that are in the firm, as well as some key skills-based training sessions. And then throughout the Clerkship program, one of the things that I found most valuable was presentations from all of the different practice groups within the firm to give you a sense of what they do and to start giving you a taste of whether that's something that you might be interested in exploring at a later point for potentially doing a graduate rotation in that team. So the training and mentoring is something that we take extremely seriously, and I think it is probably one of the most important parts for us of getting clerks in, is to help them development and seeing it as a development opportunity for them.
Yeah, and in addition to everything Catherine said, the specific teams that you go into will often also give you that more granular and specific training on that area of law. And then naturally, of course, during the period of the clerkship, if the team is undergoing their regular training sessions or their information sessions, and also the training that's available to the entire firm, you're very much welcome to attend, and you should be attending those to really make the most of every opportunity you have over that roughly 8 week period.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like there's a whole blend of formal and informal training programs, which is obviously what we want to hear for any junior lawyers as well. So we'll kind of shift into questions more about advice about the clerkship process and what you can offer some of our audience members who I'm sure are very keen on finding a bit about what the interview process is all about. So my question is, if you could give just one tip on nailing the HSF Kramer clerkship interview, which some would find very daunting, what would it be?
So I think my tip would be super prepared for the technical and experience-based questions that may arise during the interview, and really come up with example questions for everything that could be asked, or any questions that the interviewer might have regarding your CV or your clerkship application. In my experience, the interviews, at least at HSF Kramer, are more focused on assessing whether you're going to be a cultural fit for the firm, and as much as it is for assessing the transferable skills that you may already have. So the more prepared you are for the technical and experience-based questions, the more relaxed and true to yourself you're going to be, the more able you'll be to develop a natural rapport with the interviewer.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that sets our interview structure apart from some of the other interview processes that I went through as a clerk candidate, is that because it's a one-on-one interview with a partner, you can really develop it as a conversation, and it may well go in directions that you haven't quite anticipated. So my first interview here at what was then Herbert Smith Freehills was covered everything from the rugby game that the partner had taken to some clients to on the weekend, and debates about whether referees were getting too over-involved in the refereeing of that particular sport, obvious questions about my experience and transcript and so on, but it really flowed as a conversation. And I would echo what Emma said about preparation, but I would particularly echo what she said about the preparation allowing you to bring your best professional self to the interview. We are looking for people who we think we will want to come to work with every day, and so bringing yourself and your character and not being afraid to let that shine through as part of this conversation. Don't feel you have to mention every single point on your transcript or CV. We've got those as part of your application. And so just see it as a conversation, see it as an opportunity to learn more about the firm as much as it is for an opportunity for the firm to learn about you.
And I think ancillary to that, when you're preparing your CV and you're running out of space and you're trying to figure out what to include and what to omit, don't underestimate the value of including interests there. They're a really good conversation starter. They show who you are as an individual. And at the end of the day, it's the things that are not strictly work, in addition to the work-related experience you have, it's your interests, your values, and who you are as a person that really help you bond with your interviewer or with your clients or with your colleagues at the firm. So I think really, really focus on developing that as well.
To wrap things up, what is the best piece of advice that you received early on in your legal career or even in law school? Is there anything that you think students should put a particular emphasis on now regarding clerkships, confidence, or career planning in general?
I mean, this is quite basic, but it's the motto that I've lived by in my pretty junior years at the firm. Essentially, there's a learning opportunity in everything that you do, both law and not law related. And if you can't find an obvious one, or you think you're quite skilled in that particular task, then assess how you can make it a learning opportunity. So even basic things such as reading correspondence on a matter that you may not be involved in, but seeing it coming through your inbox, or being attuned to how your seniors or other people in your team communicate, delegate tasks, cultivate their relationships with clients. I think you can observe very different work and leadership styles from the seniors, and curate your own preferred style or ideal approach to these things by drawing upon that exposure. Or for example, you may be doing something that you think is more simple, such as preparing an index. Well, how can you be more efficient? How can you leverage the various technologies that we have at the firm to make it better? And how can you make it easier for juniors following on from you in the team? Can you develop precedents? Can you provide instructions that cover not just strictly how you do it, but how do the seniors in your team prefer you to do it? What are their preferred presentation styles, and various things like that? So I think just making the most of every opportunity and aiming to complete every task in a way, or attend every event in a way that you can draw some sort of learning opportunity from.
Yeah, I think the one piece of advice that probably comes a little bit with experience as well is that you can take confidence in getting to the space where you are. So if you are lucky enough to be selected to come in for an interview, it's because the firm has seen something in your written application materials that we want to learn more about. It's competitive just to get to that point, but once you are here, it's a fantastic opportunity. So just be confident. Take the confidence that comes with each of the little wins and each of the little steps you take in your career. There's a balance between, a little bit of humility and seeing everything as the learning opportunity that Emma just described, appreciating that you don't know everything, but you're not expected to on day one, but building up your experience and trusting yourself that when you get to an interview, or if you get here as a clerk, or if you come as a graduate, it's because the firm sees you as having value to bring to the table, and we want you to share that with us so that we can have the richest possible experience within our teams and ultimately deliver the best quality work for our clients by drawing on that diversity and experience and the collective intelligence and drive and enthusiasm across all of our team.
Thank you so much for meeting with us today and chatting about your experiences in disputes and at HSF Kramer more generally. We really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about the work that you do and offering practical advice to students who are hoping to follow a similar path. Don't forget, the deadline to apply for HSF Kramer clerkships is Sunday, 13th of July.
Thank you for listening to UNSW Insights by Law Society. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any further episodes.
To everyone in the middle of clerkship applications, we want to say best of luck, back yourself, stay authentic, and the right opportunity will find you.
Until next time, this was Annabelle and Will, 2025 podcast team signing.